Inside of 36 months, we'd already built 3 practices that were averaging $4 or $5 or $6 million a
And this is
year.
36 months out of dental school for you.
36 months out of dental school.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare. Our guest is Dr. Eric Roman. Eric was a DSO CEO, then he became a serial startup entrepreneur and built 6 companies over the course of COVID. Recently, he's refocused his efforts, rolled a number of the companies into the DEO, which stands for the Dental Entrepreneur Organization, which he's a partner of today. So he's been one busy man, had a lot of success and a lot of interesting experiences in his career, and I'm really glad to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Austin. Yeah, that guy sounds busy, like he doesn't have time for haircuts, right? So that's
Right.
been my life for the last couple of years here. Kind of a wild journey. It's weird when you hear it fed back to you. What the heck?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's always surreal, right? But yeah, it's cool. You know, and I got to listen to you speak at the DEO event last week, and that was really great. I liked your perspective on failure and scare. What was the term that you used? Scare?
Fear setting. Fear setting.
Fear setting.
Right?
Yeah, fear setting.
Yeah, man. You know
So,
what? And like, it's never been more true than right now, because fears have just been so prevalent for all of us. You know, it doesn't matter where you are. You haven't been able to hide from fear for the last 2 years, right? And so, you know, this is stuff I've had to do in my life to channel that energy.
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, yeah, let's talk about it real quick, if you don't mind. Can you kind of explain to people what the what fear setting actually is and how they can apply
Well,
it?
first and foremost, like, if you're new to the concept of fear setting, Tim Ferriss, the what was it, 5 Hour Work Week author, has a great TED Talk on it that you can find on YouTube, which is really great background for what it is. But the idea is how we transition the negative energy that we get in fear. Like, fear is actually a gift. We just have to learn how to use it. And so it's how you channel that negative energy into positive outcomes. And so it's just a very systematic process or a tool that you can use to really isolate the fear. I mean, how's it work for me in my life? When fears are setting in, I know I have a problem. When I go through the process of fear setting, I'm able to compartmentalize it, take it away from being something that harms me or that slows me down or that takes away my power and my energy. And then I turn it into strategy and outcomes. So like, that's maybe a nice synopsis.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, and I believe it was a Robert Kiyosaki who talked about it too. Like when he was going through scenarios with his wife, it was like they were on the brink where they kind of lost everything at one point, and then it's like they were sleeping in a hotel and they had fried chicken. It's like, and that was the last $25 that they had. And it's like, this is the worst case scenario. This is what I've always worried about. And he realized, he's like, now that he was in it, he was living out his worst case scenario. It's like, I can handle this. Like, it's not as bad as I thought. It's like, I got enough food for tonight. I'm going to get it, I'll do something to get food for tomorrow. And like this, if this is rock bottom, like it can only get better from here. And so it's kind of like he got the opportunity, for better or for worse, to live out like the absolute worst case scenario where he's totally homeless, didn't have enough money for food. And he realized he didn't die, right? Like, it wasn't like he was killed. It wasn't like he was brutally murdered. Like, he was able to bounce back. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting, like, playing through that worst case scenario in your head of whatever it is that you're thinking about.
You know, Kiyosaki, you know it and I know it. He would tell you he would never be who he is today had it not been for that experience. So was it
Yeah.
really bad? And the cool thing about when you get fear setting right, though, Austin, is that thankfully we can sometimes harness the power of the fears before we realize the pain of them, right? So you know how, like, you're afraid, you see things coming, you see the train coming down the tracks. How cool is it if you use that tool to be able to harness and prepare and use the energy before the train runs you over? That's how it's been a blessing to me and my journey. Not that I haven't gotten run over more than a fair share of times, but you get run over enough, you try to figure out how to make it work for you beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So tactically speaking, do you block off time to do this alone? Do you put it on the calendar? Do you add your employees and your staff? Like, is that like kind of the strategy?
All the above. One of the things that we've done in our consulting work with dental groups, dental companies, dental leaders, is that number one, this is an exercise I do personally at least every 90 days. Now, It's a tool in my toolkit because when I'm not sleeping because I'm scared of something, I will get up in the middle of the night and I'll start the process. Like it's how I respond when something's hitting me. Every 90 days, I do a personal check-in. Like I set my course for the next quarter. I look at wins and losses, and I go through fear setting in there because I sit there and I ask myself some of those important questions to harness some of that energy as I'm going forward. Because once we take our eye off it, things creep in. But this is also a tool that we put our businesses through every year. So I use it in every business I've ever operated. We will, at the very least, use it on annual meetings. And annual meetings will challenge our teams, our leadership teams, to really put out there on the table, like what's some stuff that's got you worried? Like what's our worst case scenario, or what could destroy this business? It's an activity of like, how would you destroy your own company, right? And then we build strategies and we harness that energy out of it. It's amazing what it's done. I mean, honestly, I honestly think that where I'm at in my journey is absolutely a fear setting exercise. It's when we recognized like the DEO was an organization that was purely aligned from a vision perspective with what we were doing. And it actually created the question of asking, why don't we work together instead of working against each other, right? And so like it was a fear setting exercise that caused this union to occur. Go figure.
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool. So I like that. Every 90 days you're coming back to it, you're reevaluating it, you're talking about it. I think it is a powerful strategy. So, but yeah, let's talk about you and your story a little bit. I know that you were born in Newton, New Jersey, but you're raised in Orlando, Florida, which is where I'm from. And so, well, not that I'm from here, but I've been here for 15 years now. So what was it like in Orlando? Like how old were you while you lived here?
So like, I mean, I was a year old when I moved there, and I lived in Orlando, literally watched them build Universal Studios. Until I was 18 years old, I was there. When I was a little kid, every night I'd be taking a bath, and you'd hear boom, 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 boom. My parents would put me in the bathtub, wrap me in a towel. We'd go watch fireworks that you could see at Disney from where we lived.
Wow.
And it's the most magical place to grow up. Super cool. Always something to do. I got to date Ariel and Cinderella and Snow White. Like, who can say that? So it was pretty killer experience. I went to high school with guys from NSYNC, and I got to grow up around the Backstreet Boys. So it's a cool life.
You're actually friends with them?
I knew Joey Fatone. He was a senior in high school when I was a freshman. We hung out a little bit, but he wouldn't acknowledge me. So yeah.
Nice. So what about, did you ever get into wakeboarding or anything like that?
A lot of my friends did. Personally, I suck at board sports. Just a general awareness in life. Like, it's been a lot of soul searching to actually own the fact that I'm never going to be good at board sports. But, dude, I was even the kneeboarding and all that stuff. Kneeboarding was the jam. That's how old I am, Austin. It was just kneeboarding. Wakeboarding is this newfangled thing that wasn't until I was out of high school. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, kneeboarding was horrible though. That's probably
it's so hard on your knees and your back.
No,
that's funny. Yeah, it's interesting because wakeboarding is literally what brought me to Orlando, and so it's hard for me to parse the two separately. But yeah, obviously, there's a lot of sports there that go. I think you were saying that you played baseball, right? Is that your main sport?
Dude, I was a baseball player. I got hooked on that. The crazy thing about sports in Florida is it's 365 days. There's never an off season. I learned a lot of lessons through that. It was a blessing. I got to play baseball in college at Florida State. Got to play in the College World Series, and I could have had a professional career. And wow. It was interesting because part of the reason though is because we played so much. I had my 10,000 hours before anybody else did. I had to sell out to that, and I couldn't do a lot of other stuff that would have been fun. So, there's yin and yang to it. Lessons learned. I'm thankful for the journey.
Yeah, and I think sports can be polarizing in the sense that they can instill a sense of work ethic, and they do instill a certain sense of work ethic, but at the same time, they instill a sense of entitlement. And so what you have is kind of like a split prong. It seems outcome with people, right? There are some really, really good guys in these mainstream sports will get, passes through high school and college, and then all of a sudden, they're a mega star, and then when they're done, they are not what you would call successful at life, right? And then they also never learn how to try in college and do those sort of things. But there are plenty of people who work really, really hard, and their work ethic is seen both on and off, the court or the field or the water or whatever it is that the sport that you're doing. And so, yeah, I find it a really interesting subject. So, like,
We could
obviously, you
talk
went
about
on to be an
that
entrepreneur.
all day. What you said is so valid relative to this concept of entitlement, how sometimes the success in one doesn't translate into the other. That's really like that's an interesting conversation for us when we talk about business people, right? Like, oh, just
Well,
because you
yeah.
you
So,
can do that.
right, that was
Real.
gonna be my question. Is like, how do you think that the sports affected the trajectory of your life?
Number one, one thing I learned is about passion and the power of passion and loving what you do. I loved baseball when I was young. I kept playing baseball because I was good at it, not because I loved it. It's actually a really stupid, boring sport most times, unless we're in like World Series or playoffs. But I still played because that was my identity and who I was. And it
Mm,
was only when I discovered that I didn't need that to be my identity, that I could choose a different passion and a different course for my life. That was a big lesson. So since then, I've had to honor the fact that when I'm in a place of not being truly in love with the things I'm doing, it's probably not the right place. It's probably not my gifts or something like that. So that was an important one. But the other thing is about, like, to your point, about number one, competition, how to utilize competition for good and not evil, how to use other people to help you grow and encourage you to develop, and then how to put in the work, right? Like when I went to, well, you know what, like in high school, I was a big fish in a little pond. I was a great player. I was, winning awards, like taking names, everything was great. Then I went to a top tier D1 school, and all of a sudden, like, I'm like the worst guy on the team. And so that's a humbling experience. I had to put in the work to get to the finish line of where, I mean, I had a couple of years where it was like, I don't know, Eric, you might not belong here. And yet I was able to put in the work, and it's almost creates this concept of, well, if I really do put in the work, I have the potential to make the achievement, right? So
mm.
anyway, a lot of lessons. Like we could go on that one all day.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's interesting. You try and think about nature versus nurture to an extent, and like I just remember, for me personally, in high school, I'd wake up, I'd go to school, I would go, I would try and cram all my studying into school because I wanted to make good grades, and then I would spend my afternoons like trying to wakeboard and then working out, and then so essentially like I'd leave straight from school, I'd go drive to a place where I coach so I could coach for a couple hours just so I could get a chance to wakeboard. I go straight from there to the gym before it closed at 9:30 or whatever. I come straight home, eat a super late dinner, and I'd be studying till 11:30.
You know?
And like that was my life, like my junior and senior year. And I don't know what it was that made me like that. I don't know why I was driven to put in those hours. Like essentially from like I was 16 years old, and I just had this. I didn't want to waste time, right? And so I just would look around at a lot of other people, and I would truthfully I was very cocky, and I would judge them for being lazy, and that's a mistake that I made. But also it makes me wonder, like, is it ever too late to adapt that mentality, right? Do you think some people are just different like that? Like, were you like that, or did you develop that later on in life? And what do you think other people can do about it?
Do you know what? You nailed it when you said nature versus nurture. Like the answer, unfortunately, that we've proven through years and years of research is it's just both. Nothing is outside of the realm of capacity of humans. Like now, is it easier for some people than it is for others? Heck yeah. But like, that's the beautiful thing about the journey that we get to be on. Like there is a certain freedom to our paths that we can choose. At the same time, like I was like you, from the age 10, I did not have a spring break or a full Christmas break until I was 23 years old. Like,
Mm,
because I was always playing baseball in tournaments.
yeah.
Holy crap, think about that. Like, just, I mean, so it was the same thing. It was a constant schedule, driving around, doing this, doing that, never ended. So, there's no right answers to it, Austin. The beauty of it is that we all get our own journeys with our own lessons. And like, I kind of had to receive that maybe it was perhaps looking back, it's not about what the other people are doing. It's about like what's true and authentic to what's going to make me, right? Like, I tried being a lot of other people and doing things like a lot of other people. The same goes for running DSOs. The same goes for real estate. Like, I tried duplicating other people, but turns out I'm not other people. I'm just Eric. And so I've had to spend a lot more time sitting in that it's okay to just be who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it takes a lot of effort to be able to do less for some people, which is the ironic part of it. But so how did you transition from baseball to, DSO? What was that path?
Well, a rotator cuff tear is an easy way to do it. I actually, I had this inkling that I wanted to be a dentist. I didn't think I wanted to run DSOs. I applied dental school, got an acceptance literally the same week that I tore my rotator cuff, and did my best to rehab it. And they said, listen, the only way you continue your professional career is you spend an additional 2 years here. We do surgery, you rehab, and then if you still got it, then you can play professionally. I'm like, I'm getting married. I got accepted to dental school. I'm gonna hit Control Alt Delete and try a different journey. My heart's not in
Wow.
this. I didn't want that. So my heart was in dentistry. It seemed like it was a cool career. Like I had good examples for how it allowed me to be the author of my outcomes. See, my parents were in the airline industry. They went through multiple company bankruptcies, like seniority-based profession, to where my dad could have been the best pilot or the worst, and it didn't matter. It was all about seniority. I could not live in a world where my outcomes were determined by how long I'd been with a company. I needed to have control. That was my lesson in childhood. So dentistry seemed like it gave me that. Little did I know, like as I'm going through dental education, I just thought I was going to be a solo practitioner. That's what I thought until about the second or third year. And I'd been reading about like the business of dentistry, and like I was really jamming on that. And so honestly, I think I spent the last 2 years of dental school studying business, not studying dentistry, and really thinking about what I wanted my entrepreneurial journey to look like.
And so speaking of entrepreneurial journey, you started a little side business when you were in dental school, selling
Yeah,
toothbrushes and golf clubs. What was that like?
Kind of, yeah. You know what? Like dental school, you ain't got no money, and yet you could theoretically have some time. And so I sold electric toothbrushes on eBay. I sold golf clubs on eBay. Like I built some pretty decent eBay businesses back in the day when it was still a baby.
So, just curious, like, are you netting like a real salary, like, a couple $1,000s a month?
I was profiting about $3,000 a month off something
Nice.
that was literally like the time was boxing things up and shipping them. That was my like time allocation. My wife, we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and like one was an office and one was a bedroom, and she would come into the office and like it would be like floor to ceiling like boxes of toothbrushes that I had to get to the post office and USPS. And so like I mean, what else is there to do at time? I learned some lessons about entrepreneurship and stuff like that. I'm sure I didn't do things right,
Well,
but
I mean, if you're spending very little time and you're making good money, it sounds like you probably learned a lot from it. I mean, was that your first stint at like starting your own company?
that was my first stint at entrepreneurship. Like, and the whole idea was it was it was a side hustle before there were side hustles, right? And that's exactly what it was. And I look back on it like my wife and I still have jokes about that. Like there's lots and lots of them about funny experiences with all that stuff. But in truth, like it was kind of catching the bug. And again, back to that point, like entrepreneurs have this innate desire to be the authors of their outcomes, right? Like that was the thing for me, is I'm like, hey, I can do this. Let's try it. Like, let's see if I can make my ads better. Let's see if I can optimize my pricing strategy to get more, more flow, right? And more deals. And so it was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, I feel so many people have that story somewhere of like their young childhood where just something happened, and a lot of times you might not even realize it. You might think, well, I don't have that nature that you guys were talking about, but if you reflect back on it, I bet you there's something that you did that you could be proud of.
Yeah, whether it was
early
mowing
on.
lawns for money or like selling lemonade or candy, it is the truth. I didn't have a lot of that like any younger, or at least I don't have that story. But what's funny too, Austin, is I wasn't thinking that at the time. I wasn't thinking this is me becoming an entrepreneur. I didn't realize it honestly until recently when, when awesome people like you asked me that question. I'm like, oh yeah, well here's what I did. And I think, oh, wow, that's intriguing. I can see that different now. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, that's super cool. So, I know that you went on to become eventually start a DSO that ultimately, I guess, failed by your definition.
I was a part of failure. Yeah, so I mean, like, failure's a wonderful teacher. I thought I was in my ideal space. Listen, laws are laws. Regulatory lawsuit kind of punched me in the face, and I ended up in 2 years of litigation and ended up losing everything on my first journey of dental entrepreneurship, which is cool because instead of letting that knock me down, that was the launching point for the second journey, right? So, like, there's two ways to look at it. One person could look at it as that's a really big failure. Like, you lost millions and millions of dollars when that thing blew up in smoke. I looked at it as in I had millions of dollars of more continuing education than everybody else, and so I might as well leverage it.
Yeah, yeah. So let's walk through that. Let's tell the story a little bit. So you graduated dental school. Would you first become an associate, or did you go straight into practice ownership? Like, what did that look like?
So you know what happened for me is I took a position. It was 2007. The financial markets blew up, and so I had already been approved for a loan to do my startup. And I had a business partner, and we were going on the startup journey. We were super excited. All was great. And the financial markets blew. And we got a call from the bank, and the bank's like, hey, we can't loan you the money that we said that we were going to loan you. I'm like, what? I mean, like, we've already signed all that. And they're like, yeah, but no, we can actually not do that. The signed documents don't mean anything. And we were like, so how much less? And they're like, well, no, we pretty much can't loan you anything. We can give you like $50,000. I'm like, you can start a practice for 50 grand. And so It was a perfect storm of stuff, and I was really worried. And so instead of going that path, what we ended up doing was taking a cool partnership with an existing DSO that really gave us carte blanche and ownership from day zero to be able to develop a market that they didn't have. So we were essentially building the same startup that we had planned out with our capital, but we were building it with a DSO partner that had a lot of other resources and limitless pockets. So that was the journey, and it went so great. Like, inside of 36 months, we'd already built 3 practices that were averaging $4 or $5 or $6 million a year.
And this is 36 months out of dental school for you.
36 months out of dental school. Yeah.
So what were you doing to get so much? Because there's just a learning curve when it comes to any business, but obviously dental too. Like, how did you go to having 36 months? What did you say? 3 practices doing how much in revenue?
12 million total revenue across 3 locations. So
Okay.
One was like at 6, one was like at 5, and then do the math on the third one.
So yeah, how did you guys do that?
You know what we did, Austin? Like, this was a beginning of transition in the information age where answers are out there, right? Like, this was the beginning of information age dental practice operation. There are answers. You don't just have to go hang a shingle and, hey son, go out there and figure it out on your own. That's what the older dentists would tell me they did. They're like, well, I just hung my shingle, my sign with my name on it, and I figured it out. I don't have to do that crap. I don't have to do that because I have the information age to give me information. So I studied it all through dental school. I read like every forum on business and everything on Dental Town when it was cool, like in all the different places in the world. I did $30,000 of CE while I was in dental school and doing residencies. So I was trying to figure out how to optimize. And the key, I mean, listen, our world knows this right now, but you give your customers what they want and you find out a way to say yes. Everybody else in the dental industry was just doing such a great job of saying no to people. No, we will not.
Like trying to go from 5 days to 4 days to 3 days to 2 days of practicing. It's like crazy.
You got it. So we took the opposite approach. We said, what do our patients want? They want us to be open. We were open 7 to 7. We were open 6 days a week. We gave away stuff like free whitening, which had no incremental cost for us. Like, we did everything philosophically to say yes to our patients. And so, that was actually, if there was one principle, what we looked for inside of our practice is we had meetings. Okay, where have we said no to patients this week? How can we not say no next time? Because they're our customers, right? How about we treat them, instead of acting like we're like this special person, this like holy, like, come to my dental practice and you may have the pleasure of being served by me. How about we treat them like we're here to give them what they want? And so it worked.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's the model that you guys used to scale up?
That was it. That was a very simple
How big
model.
did you get? How many locations? How much revenue?
So at that point, we were three locations doing about 12 million in revenue across those.
Okay.
So yeah, we
And is
had
that it? And then when did you guys start to have problems? Like when did that become,
about the
the issue?
third year. You know what? Like anybody that knows North Carolina and dental history knows that North Carolina was traditionally like this really difficult climate for DSOs, and so we got caught up in all that stuff. Got caught in a war between the dental board and a DSO, and like long story short, there wasn't a future there for us, and so we pretty much lost every bit of the value and ownership that we had developed. Gone, poof, just like that.
Mm. Man, that's crazy. So what was your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway, you remember that whole thing I said about lessons from my youth, like not having somebody else dictate the outcomes of your future? Turns out I had ended up doing that again. Well, that sucks. So just like, that was one lesson. And the other lesson though was
You
like,
mean the when you say letting somebody else dictate it, you're talking about the Medicaid?
what's
Medicare?
that?
What like who are you referring to when you say letting
With
somebody
my
else
with
dictate?
my parents, when like their airlines went bankrupt and
Sorry,
some
yeah,
of my
I
parents
meant
lost
for
their
you.
job, like I was like, ugh, I got caught up in somebody else's trash and it
Okay.
cost me my livelihood, right? And so
Okay.
that was point number one. That's when I realized like, hey, maybe this next portion of the entrepreneurial journey, I need to have total control, right? And that was one piece of it. But the other thing was like, we can look back on the negative of it, but what was the positive? Well, I learned a heck of a lot, and we built and did some stuff like you won't find many other people that can tell a story of true organic growth of dental practices that grew faster or quicker than ours did. What can we take away from that and apply? And what lessons can we take away and apply that will prevent us from having the same problems? So, that was the idea. Now, that said, in the next journey in building my own DSO, I still screwed up a whole bunch.
Of course. We all do.
It went from mistakes over here, then I tipped the teeter-totter all the way over to the other side, and I made the exact opposite mistakes. So, go figure.
And how did the second one go for you?
Second one went great. Over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, we built an organic DSO there in North Carolina that grew in this. You know what? Like I say it that it grew quick. It grew really quickly for building practices from scratch start. But at the same time, we still made a bunch of different mistakes. And I just recognized as we got further along there, eventually I was a full-time non-clinical CEO. I was really enjoying this concept of building an executive team, of leading my people and empowering them to be great, of looking at my dentists like my customer, in that I actually had two customers. I had my dentists and then I had my patients. Those are both customers for me. And so like really approaching it that way was beautiful and fun. But at the same time, I realized I don't think I want to run a DSO forever. Like it was fun, but we all know the pains that happen in there. And so I recognized in some life events that it was time for me to maybe step out of that and move on to a new journey. And thankfully, I had a private equity exit 2019 that allowed me to do that.
Rode the wave all the way to the beach.
Darn right. Yep,
As
that's
Warren Buffett would
exactly
say.
right. Wrote it
That's
in
great.
and decided to finish it and go try something new.
Yeah. So my mind's reeling right now because there's a million different ways we could go. Earlier when we talked, we almost talked for an hour, just all these different places. But so that kind of is obviously what led into your coaching business, right? Where you coach dental executives, and so I think some of the things that we talked about is because, correct me if I'm wrong, you essentially, I mean, I know now you've got the EOS, the traction model, which is like kind of developing systems to help people be more accountable and productive within their organization, like in a structured way. And so before that, were you coaching dental entrepreneurs and like an individual dentists by themselves, and that lead into the traction, or was traction something that you were doing and you implemented while you were growing the DSO?
Totally separate for me. First thing, like we recognize along the journey when you're going from a practice into a business, there's a new set of needs. There's a new set of fundamentals and architecture that has to be in place. And we sucked at it. And you know what? EOS was the answer for us on our journey. And so, just providing that support to other dental entrepreneurs that are on the journey was a big part of it. We've recognized now, though, that even in EOS, there's a lot of stuff that's missing. Dental entrepreneurs have unique needs, have a unique experience, and like we want the fastest way to get there. So everybody needs an operating system. There's a lot of operating systems that are out there. So yeah, focusing and building an operating system just for dental entrepreneurs has been one part of the journey. At the same time, like even while I was a CEO of a dental group, I was starting work with coaching and advisory work of other dentist entrepreneurs because I had a unique approach to the way that we had done things. People enjoyed, my candor and my vulnerability about how much I suck and how to avoid the mistakes that I've made, And so it's kind of like all these things happen together at the same time. In our business model, we had to build our average age of nearly 300 employees was like 24. And so we had to build really robust systems for how to effectively lead and manage millennials. And so like all these things kind of came together to create like what was the next phase of my journey after running a DSO.
Yeah. So, during that stage, did you notice some commonalities like, when you're coaching dental executives or people within DSOs, like what are the is there like a, common steps that you feel like you do something, you have a limited belief, maybe you break through and you level up and then it's the next thing?
Well, there's a common set of mistakes that we all make. Let's be clear about that. One common mistake is we all think because we're good at one thing, we're good at something else, and we're not. Just because, another secret common mistake is we think because theoretically we make a lot of money that we're good at business. Doesn't mean that. A lot of times we make a lot of money because we got lucky and picked a good profession. That was the real key, not the fact that you've got business prowess. And so like you see it all the time. I'm a great dentist, so I'm obviously a great real estate executive also, and I really know what I'm doing. And the answer is not necessarily. I've seen some, but I've seen a lot more failures there than normal. So this hubris born out of success is one key. The other thing that I saw all the time, Austin, this is my favorite thing to talk about truthfully, is that like we all say that we're doing this for something else. Like, why are you building this business? Like, well, for my family, right? Or for my home life, or because I want this. But ironically, we typically burn our families, our home lives, and all the other stuff in the process of building the business. And in building the business, there's always something else. And so like, it's kind of this weird irony. That was my journey, like it's this weird irony of like, hurting the people you say you're actually doing all the work for. Is that really the right answer? So I see that with almost every one of, that's honestly, I think it's the entrepreneurial journey secretly, or the entrepreneurial deception or lie, right? So I lived that one, and that one was really common as well. So those are two big ones.
Yeah, and then there's also the part, where when you go from being a clinician to a DSO founder, you actually take a big haircut in the pay, right?
Amen. Yeah. Well, I know there's some people that don't, and everybody wants to be those people, but that's just the reality of it. Here's the deal. Particularly as dentists, we make a lot of money with our hands. Like we make a lot, and when you have a successful dental practice, it's profitable. And yet scaling does not multiply your profitability. It's a fraction of it. And all of a sudden, like, I went from making early in my career $400,000 and $500,000 a year to a gradually decreasing income year over year over year. I'm like, what the crap? My company's getting better. I have all these employees, but I make less money. What's going on? Yeah, it's because that's the way the system and the story often works, So
right. Well, what you were collecting as profit, is part of the business expense. It doesn't count towards your business profit or your business EBITDA, right? So now you got to hire somebody to do that. And then that now, what was profit before is now an expense. And so the only profit you make is what's left over.
Oh man, like we can talk about this all day. Scaling is an exponential pain, right? Two practices aren't twice as hard as one. They're 4 times as hard. 3 is 8 times as hard as a single one. Like, and you know what? We all, like, our systems get loose. Things slide. Yeah. We're not as effective. We're not as profitable. The magic of the founder that made for the good practice isn't in the second and the third one. And so it's like, woo, lot of pressures, and yet this is the story. Like every entrepreneur in the space typically goes through all these cycles.
Yeah. So then, how do you coach how to effectively and adequately delegate?
Well, you never stop. coaching how to adequately and effectively delegate. That's the first thing, Austin. Like, it's funny. I've literally been on 3 calls in 2 days specifically about that topic. The first thing is, like, you do have to have a baseline for how you're ascertaining, who am I? Like what should I be doing that nobody else can do as well as I can? Like, what are the things that are my unique gifts and skills and capabilities that, like, Eric Roman should be spending Eric Roman's time on? And then isolating which things are the things that, like, even if other people don't do them as good as me, if they do them at 60% of my capacity, it's probably good for me to not do it. Which things de-energize me? And then, like, when you have this cycle of realization, you have to know how to effectively empower someone else to do a job. Like, that's, you just don't, what do most of us do? We're like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. You do it. And then what's our problem? Well, it's not done effectively, or it blows up in our faces. And we're like, you didn't do it well enough. That's like the normal, like, delegation for an executive. Real delegation is, hey, here's the deal. Here's the success criteria of what I need accomplished. Do you feel like you have the skills to be able to hit this success criteria and these KPIs in order to get it done on this timetable? Yes or no? Yes, great. We'll check back in on a weekly basis to make sure you're on target and make sure it's being hit. But, like, I just let them do it, right? You establish
the difference. Yeah, it's like the difference between macromanaging and micromanaging. Like, micromanaging has such a bad connotation that, like, people just, employees love to throw it out. Oh, micromanaging. And then they want you to do absolutely nothing, have full autonomy, zero accountability. But that's not accurate. That doesn't help. What you need is macromanaging, which is kind of what you described, which is like, hey, what's the outcome? Can you hit the outcome? Can I measure this outcome? Can I help you achieve it? Like, you don't really, to me, it's like, you don't really care about the how that much, right? Like, if they can have the full autonomy to do what they want, as long as they're hitting those outcomes that you've specified, then you have total freedom to do it.
99%, 90% of dentists are micro, because everything we do is in millimeters and micrometers and stuff like that inside people's faces. But the other half of it is when we want to get things off of our plate, we don't do macro management. We do abdication management. We just let go and we're like, screw it. I don't even want to touch this. Just figure it out. And we get mad when they don't.
Right. Here's a role. You go do it. There's no expectation, and then all of a sudden you can't meet an expectation if there isn't any, right? You're always going to fail. So it's always, it's good to have those clear expectations. I think that's really helpful. So, and then let's talk about real estate too, because, we mentioned, we were talking about how dentists can leverage their real estate to scale their businesses. So do you want to talk about that for a second? Yeah,
well, first thing is, like, we all know that there's value in real estate, right? Like, that real estate ain't real estate for no reason. There's a reason that almost every major legacy wealth story in the history of mankind involves real estate, right? And so, like, you have to honor that as a portion of the process. We were thankful to, like, well, there's pitfalls and there's advantages, but in our journey, real estate was icing on the cake for us. So the way that we approached it, Austin, was that we wanted the absolute best location that we could get, because that drove patients no matter what, and patients were our key livelihood. So location number one was what we wanted. However, if we could have top location and own it, that was our goal. So we leveraged real estate whenever we could. But here's the challenge. Like, all of a sudden we started realizing, as we were scaling through 3 and 4 and now up to 5 locations in the journey, the real estate was all of a sudden precluding our ability to get funding to build new locations, because that's
of the debt.
The point. Somewhere in there, capital becomes an issue. And so now we had asset value built up in real estate, but part of the problem was they're saying, yeah, well, we can't fund you to do any more. So we had a tough choice to make. Do we want to continue on this legacy wealth journey on real estate, or do we want to leverage the asset that we've now built, get rid of it, and turn it into cash to build more practices? That's what we did. And the fact is, real estate and dental practices rarely move at the exact same speed. So you have to prioritize one or the other. We had some friends that had prioritized the real estate. That was the whole reason they were in dentistry. It was effective for them, but they grew slower. What did we do? We said, let's prioritize the dental growth and not the real estate. And so we were able to get more locations faster. Splitting hairs as to which one was better, but it was just our choice.
Yeah, they're what we like to call quality problems or first world problems that you have because it's like, where's the best return of your capital? And so, but truthfully, yeah, what you guys did was smart. And I just think in general that a DSO is going to make more money when they put their money back into the DSO. And it sounds weird coming from me as a real estate guy. It's like, shouldn't you be advocating for real estate all the time? Well, yeah, I do. I do advocate for purchasing real estate, obviously. But like when you have a skill set as specific as the DSO and you're getting 30, 40, 50, 100% return on the capital, annually that you're investing in that, like you can't match that in real estate, right? And so, another thing is that, and so to your point, it's like, yeah, when you have an asset at some point, like you've had it for a while, now you have the ability to, sign longer leases, work with the sellers or whatever, get some value there, offload those. You're freeing up the amount of debt you have. You're allowing banks to give you some more lending. Maybe hopefully made a little bit of money on those buildings on the way up. Now you can use that to scale the business because real estate does grow. It grows really well, and you can do it creatively to get really good ROI. But chances are, if you're a DSO and your real estate is keeping you from growing your DSO, like I think you should focus on your core competency, right? Now, of course, we do advocate.
There's a time and there's a place, though. Like that's what I did. Yeah. And so what was cool? When I finished my DSO journey, I had 0 assets outside of my DSO. Like nothing. What was in my bank account was my only asset, right? I had invested everything in the DSO, but Austin, it got ridiculous asymmetric returns for me, right? Much more asymmetric returns than real estate did. So what did I do when I exited? What did I do with my capital? 100% of it went into real estate now. So now over the last 2 years, I've been establishing that real estate portfolio with a much bigger chunk of asymmetrically earned revenue, right? So, like there's a time and there's a place. The key is like, sometimes we just want to do everything all at once. Like more power to you if you can pull that off. I'm not that guy. I'm not a multitasker. Like I had to recognize this guy's a heck of a lot more knowledgeable about building a DSO than he is about building a real estate portfolio. So like I did the former, now I can learn on the latter.
And we absolutely advocate investing in real estate, but we advocate that as a hedge or diversification. And so what's ironic is that when you're investing in the real estate in your business or in your DSO, you're not diversifying yourself because the value of the real estate is tied to the value of the business.
I'd actually argue you're increasing your risk significantly, Austin, because when one goes up in smoke, when the DSO industry turns, your real estate portfolio is screwed, right?
So, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to invest as an LP, like a limited partner, to own a portion of your buildings, right? But also, then you can take that same capital and you can spread it out, and you can own a portion of a lot of different buildings, of a lot of different groups, of a lot of different sectors that are maybe outside of just dental. And so, I think that it's like. Either way, it's a good problem to have. The question always comes down to what is the best return on my capital, is what you got to ask yourself.
Yeah,
kind of adjusted for
risk. It's a different portion of your portfolio also, right? Like again, to my point, I didn't save money during the journey. I reinvested every dollar in the dental business. That was a choice. It was a high risk choice for me, but it's what I chose to do, and thankfully it worked. At the same time, a much more judicious strategy is to be moving money into a secondary avenue of your portfolio, which to your point, and you know what? Like in the LP model that you just talked about, Austin, we can diversify markets. We can diversify macro markets. We can own portions of dental practices ranging across the country. We can mix them with medical offices and traditional retail and other things so that we have a far more stable portfolio that's able to weather what is an inevitable shift. That's just the way the world works, right?
Yeah, 100%. I asked you earlier about any podcast and book recommendations, and you had a really interesting answer, which is that you stopped doing podcasts, so you don't do podcasts. So and then at one point you were doing 30 books a year. So usually one of the questions I ask towards the end of the interview is, what are your podcast and book recommendations? But I'm curious to hear your perspective on this.
Good. I love being the antithesis of normal answers. First and foremost, Austin, I appreciate the space. I really enjoy it. But there comes a point in life where we have an excessive amount of information overload. And what I recognized in my life was that at a certain point, after reading 30 great books every year for the better part of a decade, I had the information. What I really needed to do was apply crap. And so I stopped focusing on absorbing more information and refocusing on execution of important things inside my life. So that's just a general shift that I've been through. Let me say it another way. I was an overconsumer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm guilty of that too.
it's like, it really sucks because
Because you feel good. You get an adrenaline kick. You feel productive. You learn something. But there's absolutely no way you can go out and do all these things that you're learning because there's just too many of them.
Do you know what? It made it hard to work for me. It made it really hard to work for me. My job is to lead large teams and help them be their best. But when I was constantly consuming and like urinating my ideas all over everybody, they couldn't they couldn't
Can't keep
capture
up.
it. And it was hard. And so like I had to realize, Eric, if you want to have more impact in people's lives, and if you want your companies to stay focused, you need to stay focused, right? So, forgive me for taking the opposite stance of what I carried for a decade.
No, it's great. I mean, yeah, I really, I like to listen to podcasts at 2x speed and books at 2x speed, and I'll listen to them multiple times sometimes if they're really good. But at the end of the day, like if when you're jumping from subject to subject, and I've had to do the same thing recently. I've also taken a fast from reading books, not completely. But I've slowed down a lot. Where I used to have all these books in my Audible and I'd go from one to one to one. For the exact same reason, I was getting information overload. And I said, you know what, we need to slow down and let's go deep, not wide. And so I would pick one topic to listen to podcasts to, and I just go really, really deep in that. But I'd try not to be scatterbrained, right? And then I would pick two topics, and I would try and keep it limited to those. And so it's good that we're having this conversation because I feel myself getting dragged back into it, right? All the different things that are interesting and exciting and that you learn about, but that really aren't going to do anything for your life. And so this is good for me as a reminder to refocus on the things that I want to listen to.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add there is consider what you're replacing that time with. Because for some reason, I think the hustle mentality sits there and says, well, if I'm not absorbing this information, if I'm not listening to what's on the podcast, if I'm not keeping up with everybody else, I'm going to fall behind. I'm not so sure that's the case, Austin, because there's areas of value. Like sometimes listening to music and deprogramming yourself and putting yourself in a space of peace and honoring who you are. Sometimes if it's self-work or meditation or even just a walk in the park with your kids or something else along those lines, we could probably make a case that it may empower you to be a better leader than the stuff that we were thinking we needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's 100% true. So, in case anybody wants to reach out, get in touch, find out more, what's a good resource for them to do that?
Well, now as a portion of my new life inside the DEO Dental Group, eRoman at deodentalgroup.com. I love to connect directly with people that are entrepreneurs inside the space. It's what I do. People can learn more about how we've trained millennials to be effective leaders and managers in business just from joyfulpeople.com. It's online training, and in less than an hour, your team will be shifted perpetually. So lots of different options, but Austin, I'm not going anywhere. This is my industry and my space, and I love it. And as you can tell, it brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for your work.